A game that looked completely lost for me in the opening, then completely won, then thrown away, and then, on the very last move, my opponent hands me a checkmate. This is one of those bullet games where the evaluation swings wildly, and the real lesson isn't about brilliance, it's about staying alert when everything is chaos. My opponent is Selva Priyanv, rated 682, just 13 points above my 669. A bullet game, 2 minutes plus 1 second increment. Let me walk you through what happened. The game opens with pawn to e4, and I respond with pawn to d5, the Scandinavian defense. My opponent takes on d5. I recapture with my queen, and white plays pawn to d4, followed by knight to c6 from me, and knight to f3 from my opponent. Now here I play queen to a5, check, giving check. My opponent blocks with pawn to c3, and I develop my bishop to g4, putting pressure on the knight. White plays pawn to h3, and I take the knight with bishop takes f3. My opponent recaptures with queen takes f3. So we've traded my bishop for a knight, and the position is roughly level. Maybe a slight edge for my opponent throughout this whole sequence. Standard Scandinavian territory so far. And this is where I make my first real mistake. I play pawn to f6. Now, f6 is a move that weakens my king's position significantly. It blocks the natural development of my knight and creates long-term problems. The position swings from a slight edge for my opponent to what the engine considers winning for my opponent. A costly slip this early in the game. But my opponent doesn't capitalize as sharply as possible. White plays bishop to e3, a reasonable developing move, and the advantage drops back to a clear advantage for my opponent. Still better for white, but not as crushing as it could have been. I castle queenside with castles queenside, getting my king to relative safety. My opponent plays bishop to c4, developing the bishop, and I push pawn to e5, challenging the center. The position is still clearly in my opponent's favor here, and then my opponent plays bishop takes g8, capturing my knight on g8. Now this is interesting. The engine actually says this swings the position all the way to a slight edge for me. My opponent has won a knight, but in doing so, gave up the light-squared bishop and opened up my rook. I recapture with rook takes g8, and now the material is even, a bishop and knight on each side. But the position has shifted. For the first time in this game, I'm the one with the edge. White takes on e5 with pawn takes e5, and I recapture with my knight. Knight takes e5. The position is roughly balanced now. My opponent plays queen to f5, check, giving check, and I calmly step my king to b8. White castles kingside, and I develop my bishop to d6. Everything is roughly level through this stretch. Now my opponent grabs my h-pawn with queen takes h7, and the position tilts to a slight edge for me. I'm up in development and activity even though I've lost a pawn. I play pawn to g6, chasing the queen, and white retreats to queen to pawn to h4. I push pawn to g5, continuing to advance on the king side. White plays queen to e4, and the advantage grows. The engine now says I'm winning. I push pawn to g4, and my opponent plays h4. The position is decisively in my favor at this point. But here I play bishop to c5, and the engine does not like this at all. The advantage drops sharply, from winning for me all the way back down to just a slight edge. I had a dominant position, and this move lets my opponent breathe. A real missed opportunity in a bullet game where every tempo matters. Fortunately, my opponent plays pawn to g3, and the advantage swings right back, winning for me again. I play knight to f3, check, giving check, and my opponent steps to king to g2. I capture the bishop with bishop takes e3, and white recaptures with pawn takes e3. The bishops are traded off, and I'm still winning. I push pawn to f5, and my opponent retreats the queen to f4, and this is where I throw it all away. I play knight to d2. This move is a disaster. The evaluation collapses from winning for me all the way down to roughly balanced. A swing of over 500 centipons worth of advantage, gone in a single move. In a position where I was completely dominant, I've given my opponent a lifeline. My opponent captures the knight with knight takes d2, and I recapture the knight with rook takes d2, check, giving check. The knights are traded, and the position is now dead level. My opponent steps back with king to g1, and I reposition my queen to d5. The position is roughly balanced. Both sides have a queen, 2 rooks for me versus 2 rooks for my opponent, and a handful of pawns each. It looks like this game could go either way. And then, on the very last move of the game, my opponent plays queen takes f5, capturing my f-pawn. But this is a fatal error. The engine immediately shows a forced mate in 1. I play queen to g2, checkmate. My queen lands on g2, and there is absolutely nowhere for the white king to go. Just like that, a game that swung back and forth, from my mistake in the opening to a winning position I nearly squandered to a level endgame, ends with my opponent walking into a checkmate on the very last move. So what's the lesson here? Honestly, this was not a clean game from either side. I made real mistakes. f6 in the opening weakened my position. bc5 let my advantage slip. And knight d2 nearly threw away a winning game entirely. But the takeaway is this. In bullet chess, the game is never over until it's over. My opponent had every chance to hold or even win, but one careless capture on the final move allowed a checkmate in 1. Stay alert. Even when the position is level, one move can end everything. That's the beauty and the danger of bullet chess. If you enjoyed this breakdown, consider subscribing to Sayloby for more real game analyses, honest, educational, and always grounded in what actually happened on the board. I'll see you in the next one.